Stars of the hit television program, Gold Rush, Tony and Mike Beats, are well known for their outrageous personas and their adventurous forays into the world of gold mining. The show's viewers followed their adventure through difficult terrain, mining difficulties, and the drama that accompanied attempting to make a fortune in the harsh wilderness. Their lives appeared to be an illustration of the American dream, a thrilling, daring tale being acted out on TV. They used perseverance, hard effort, and a willingness to take chances to establish their name, company, and reputation. But when the startling news leaked, everything was different. Mike Beats and Tony Beats received life sentences. Everyone was caught off guard by this unexpected and catastrophic turn of events. The Beats family, who had come to represent gold mining on television, found themselves embroiled in a scandal in real life. What went wrong? And how did these two guys, who were once commended for their tenacity, find themselves in this precarious position? Many found it hard to accept that those who had supported them on television were suddenly doubting what they believed to be true about the Beats family. The abrupt change in circumstances left a path of perplexity, incredulity, and most importantly, interest. Following a fierce legal battle, the announcement was made. A far harsher picture than anyone had anticipated was depicted by the incidents that the investigation turned up. The case's specifics were meticulously concealed, which increased the mystique surrounding the whole thing. Stay tuned as we explore Tony and Mike's adventure, what specifically they did to get into this situation, whether they engaged in lawful activity, or whether a more intricate chain of circumstances ultimately brought them to ruin. The Netherlands' Wees-Dennis is a little village where Tony Beats was born in 1959. With only hope and a few cash in his pocket, he bravely traveled to Canada in 1980 at the age of 21. He first made his home in Alberta, where he worked on a dairy farm to support himself. Although life was difficult, Tony was used to working hard. But he quickly came to the conclusion that, despite being a noble occupation, farming provided few opportunities for financial gain. He turned his attention to mining, after being captivated by tales of wealth and motivated by his unwavering work ethic. Many would have been deterred by the harsh weather and isolated wilderness of the Klondike region in the Yukon Territory. But Tony was not. He saw opportunities rather than barriers. Tony Beats did more than mine for gold in the Yukon. He left behind a legacy. His ascent in the gold mining industry was framed by the harsh terrain and severe weather. He not only struck gold, but also found his true passion through tenacity and guts. It was more than simply a job to mine. It became his way of life, making him one of the most well-known and prosperous people in the field. Success wasn't limited to the Yukon for Tony Beats. He started from nothing and developed an empire in gold mining. Tony transformed his humble origins into a family-run mining empire that grew to become one of the most well-known businesses in the Klondike. Despite having virtually nothing at first, Minnie Beats, his wife, was instrumental from the start, keeping the books, finances, and business side of things organized, while Tony concentrated on field operations. The Beats children, Mike, Monica, and Kelvin, followed in their father's footsteps as the company expanded. Instead of seeking employment elsewhere, they joined the family business and became proficient in operating large, multi-million-dollar heavy gear. They learned the craft the hard way, often in inclement weather and difficult conditions under Tony's tutelage. Tony immediately became well known for his extensive mining expertise, unwavering work ethic, no-nonsense demeanor, and exuberant personality. He distinguished himself from other miners with his unusual tactics, fierce temper, and renownedly colorful vocabulary. His now iconic saying, "Shut the up and keep mining," was frequently used to highlight his reputation for giving instructions and pushing his crew, including his family, to their limits. Tony became a fan favorite on the popular reality show, Gold Rush, because of his unvarnished authenticity. People respected his unwavering will to succeed, in spite of the obstacles, and his refusal to sugarcoat truth. Tony Beats wasn't a rookie when he joined Gold Rush in Season 2. He had already worked as a miner for several years. Tony's years of experience in the field gave him a level of knowledge that many of the other miners did not have. In the hard Klondike circumstances, Tony's enterprise often surpassed the competition, producing impressive gold totals year after year, while many of his contemporaries found it difficult to discover gold. He succeeded where others failed because of his background and methodical approach to mining. By Season 5, Tony made a daring move that cemented his status as one of the Klondike's most driven miners. He paid an incredible $1 million for the famous dredge at Eureka Creek. It was a huge risk that many detractors believed would be disastrous. Where others saw danger, Tony saw opportunity. He invested heavily in the restoration of the fabled dredge, a huge, antiquated piece of mining machinery. In defiance of all odds, Tony turned the dredge into a thriving venture that bolstered his empire and disproved his detractors. Producers soon recognized that Tony Beets and his family were a crucial component of the Gold Rush's popularity as the show grew. The show's success was largely attributed to Tony's exaggerated personality and the drama that existed inside the Beets family. Known as the Vikings of the Klondike, the Beets family contributed a distinct vitality to the program, and their plots emerged as some of the most captivating for fans. Gold wasn't the only factor. It focused on the Beets family's tenacity, vibrant relationships, and relentless drive for achievement. In the Yukon wilderness, Tony discovered something even more precious than gold, a stage on which to demonstrate his sincerity and resolve. His experience demonstrated that even the most improbable endeavors might become profitable enterprises with perseverance, hard work, and measured risk-taking. Although Tony Beets' success in the Klondike was not assured, it was the result of decades of tenacity and unrelenting dedication to his objectives. In front of television viewers, the Beets family developed a mining empire that grew steadily over time. Watchers saw the family's growing power in the gold mining sector as they increased operations and staked more claims. Tony Beets, a seasoned miner with a reputation for tough leadership in the field and on screen, was at the heart of this development. His son, Mike Beets, worked closely with him. Mike was enmeshed in the mining industry from an early age and eventually rose to become his father's trusted right-hand man. He showed a strong work ethic and innate leadership as he studied every aspect of the company, from managing crew logistics to handling heavy machinery. It appeared that Mike would eventually take over the family business, Paradise Hill, carrying on Tony's tradition. But there was conflict in their father-son connection. Despite their close relationship, the demands of the mining industry frequently put it to the test. Shouting matches and heated arguments were typical, especially during challenging mining seasons. Despite these disagreements, Mike and Tony respected one another, and Tony progressively gave him more responsibility so that he could eventually lead the Beets mining operation. However, the story took a darker turn behind the scenes. Following environmental complaints in 2019, federal officials started looking into the Beets family business, specifically for offenses related to improper wastewater disposal. What started off as routine checks quickly developed into a more extensive inquiry. According to reports, authorities found irregularities in the company's documents, including questionable variances in the reporting of gold production. There have been allegations that the transfer of authority from Tony to Mike and the family involved more than just the sharing of mining expertise. According to investigators, illicit activities may have been ingrained in the company for decades, entwining illicit activity with otherwise lawful mining operations. As the inquiry progressed, it became evident that the family's ascent to prominence in the mining sector might have been accompanied by illegal acts that had ingrained themselves deeply into the company's daily operations over many years. What had at first seemed to be a simple story of family achievement in the mining business was overshadowed by the legal and criminal intricacies underlying the Beets empire. Court documents state that when former employees came forward with bombshell charges regarding unlawful mining techniques and widespread tax fraud, the investigation into the Beets family's mining firm intensified considerably. Mining Inspector John Reeves provided one of the most important statements, revealing that environmental samples from the tailings ponds on the Beets claims contained dangerous pollutants such as cyanide and mercury. Since these compounds represent serious health and environmental dangers, including groundwater contamination and long-term harm to local ecosystems, they are strictly prohibited in contemporary gold mining. According to Reeves' evidence, these chemicals were purposefully utilized to increase the rate of gold recovery, particularly in the early morning while television crews were off-site and missing. Prosecutors claimed that these illegal activities were purposefully hidden in order to maximize earnings and preserve a positive public image. Brian Anderson, a former mechanic who had spent 8 seasons working with the Beets family, provided the most damning proof. Anderson complied with investigators and supplied covert video evidence that revealed Tony and Mike Beets talking with Venezuelan buyers on gold transactions that were never disclosed to tax officials. Prosecutors claim that this footage demonstrated the presence of a sophisticated money laundering scheme. The plan was to sell gold off the books in order to evade taxes and scrutiny from other countries. Monetary. According to testimony from prosecution-appointed experts, between 2012 and 2022, exactly when the Beats family's notoriety on the Discovery Channel's Gold Rush peaked. More than $15 million in gold transactions remained unrecorded. After more research, it was discovered that Tony Beats' office included a second set of financial documents. According to reports, these documents revealed the true gold recovery figures, which were much more than those reported to tax officials or portrayed on television. Peter Lewis, a former crew member, testified that much of what viewers saw on Gold Rush was a carefully edited version of a much larger, more covert operation, which further supported these assertions. According to Lewis, Tony often told his crew, "What happens after the cameras leave stays between us," suggesting a conscious attempt to conceal some actions from the film crew and authorities. The Beats family's legal team, headed by well-known defense lawyer Samantha Wright, put up a strong fight in a high-profile court case against the grave accusations of tax evasion, environmental crimes, and illegal gold transactions. Wright suggested that the prosecution's witnesses were driven more by animosity than by the facts, dismissing them as irate former workers with personal grudges. Wright vigorously upheld Tony Beats' character, presenting him as a diligent but ultimately law-abiding businessman who had established a mining empire via decades of unrelenting labor rather than illegal activity. Wright told the jurors, "This is a man who dedicated his entire life to building a business." She underlined that the Beats family had been under public scrutiny for more than 10 years, having gained widespread recognition as a result of their roles in the hit television show Gold Rush. According to Wright, these are TV celebrities rather than criminal masterminds. With national cameras filming, why would anyone engage in illicit activities? Prosecutors, however, presented a quite different image. They maintained that the Beats' notoriety was a strategic advantage and a perfect smokescreen rather than a hindrance. The family is accused of drawing attention away from a much larger and more covert off-camera mining activity by presenting a regulated, sterilized version of their activities on television. The real business, according to the prosecution, was making millions of dollars in unreported revenue and creating irreparable environmental damage, even though viewers watched staged mining for pleasure. The jury just needed 3 days to make a unanimous decision, following 6 weeks of dramatic testimony from more than a dozen witnesses. "I'm guilty of everything." The charges included running an unauthorized gold trading network, environmental infractions, and conspiracy to commit tax fraud. Judge Rebecca Holloway made it apparent at sentencing that she would not be lenient with the defendants. She called their misdeeds a direct threat to the delicate ecosystem of the Yukon and a heinous betrayal of public trust. The use of prohibited chemicals like cyanide and mercury has already resulted in long-term groundwater damage that might last for centuries. According to expert testimony she referenced, Tony Beats refused to back down when he was given the opportunity to speak to the court. "I created everything out of nothing," he said. "My freedom is yours to take, but what I made is not." Mike Beats, his son, seemed more reserved and emotional. He claimed in court that he had simply done as his father had instructed, a plea that Judge Holloway rejected as practical but ultimately inadmissible. Even seasoned legal watchers were taken aback by the eventual ruling. Tony and Mike Beats will both be imprisoned for life, although legal experts pointed out that this type of punishment is extremely uncommon for financial offenses. Prosecutors were successful in their argument that the extent of the environmental damage called for the most severe punishment. Judge Rebecca Holloway made a harsh closing remark after Tony and Mike Beats were found guilty in a dramatic trial and given life sentences. She claimed that it is not worth contaminating the land and water for generations in order to pursue gold. Her remarks, which conveyed the seriousness of the case's legal and environmental ramifications, reverberated throughout the courtroom and beyond. Both the entertainment business and the mining industry were rocked by the news of the sentencing. Due to their long-running appearance on the Discovery Channel's Gold Rush program, which chronicled the difficulties and victories of placer gold mining in the Yukon, the Beats family had gained widespread recognition. Following the Beats' demise, the show's legitimacy and the public perception of the business were closely examined. The Discovery Channel promptly responded by issuing a formal statement distancing itself from the incident. "These findings have surprised and severely disappointed us. Discovery was never made aware of any illicit activity at the mining sites that were the subject of Gold Rush. We are reassessing our oversight procedures going ahead, since we take these accusations seriously." In response, Raw Television, the show's production company, declared that the series would undergo immediate and substantial adjustments. Future episodes would specifically discuss the criminal case, and all current programs involving the Beats family would be removed from streaming services. Although the Gold Rush would not be canceled, it would go forward with more stringent production guidelines and a renewed emphasis on openness. Co-stars also responded incredulously to the revelation, according to The Mining. In a statement, Parker Schnabel, who portrayed Tony Beets in a rivalry and occasionally aggressive relationship on screen, said, "I never suspected anything illegal, but Tony was always intense and uncompromising. This changes how I'll view everything that happened during those seasons." The Beets legal team swiftly filed appeals, despite the devastating verdict, citing what they described as numerous procedural errors during the trial, including the admissibility of covert recordings and the handling of expert testimony. Rick Ness, another longtime miner and cast member, was visibly shaken when approached by reporters. "I'm speechless. Never saw this coming." In the meantime, Tony and Mike Beets were moved to different maximum security correctional facilities, where they are awaiting the results of their appeals. However, legal analysts pointed out that the scope and magnitude of the evidence make a successful appeal unlikely, saying that overturning such a comprehensive conviction is a legal uphill battle. Even though Tony and Mike Beets were found guilty and given life sentences for a number of financial and environmental offenses related to their gold mining business, not all of their family members were involved in the case, which still has an impact on various industries, and serves as a warning about the high costs of environmental crime and the dangers of combining celebrity with business. In a rare and heartfelt public statement outside the courthouse, many defended Tony's legacy and character. "We've been together for 40 years. I know this man. He built everything we have through hard work, not through crime." Tony's wife and longtime business partner, Minnie Beets, was not charged in the case and has remained steadfast in her support of her husband. The truth will be revealed. Their children, Kevin and Monica Beets, who had both participated in the family's mining company and frequently appeared on Gold Rush, were mainly silent during the proceedings and, in contrast, were not charged. Both were observed attending court sessions during the trial, and prosecutors later verified that they had cooperated with investigators in exchange for immunity, though it was not made clear how much they knew about the illegal activities or how involved they were. Environmental remediation efforts are already underway, and preliminary assessment reports estimate the cleanup will cost taxpayers over $20 million and could take several decades to complete. The Canadian government has seized the Paradise Hill mining operation, once valued at millions and considered a landmark on the Gold Rush series. The Beets family's demise is spreading. A machine once considered a monument to Klondike mining history was now condemned as toxic waste after tests showed mercury contamination throughout its structure, making Tony Beets's restored dredge a massive piece of mining equipment that had once been a centerpiece of the show, one of the most symbolic losses in the wake of the scandal. Locals' reactions in Dawson City have been mixed, with some acknowledging that the Beets family's television presence brought international attention and tourism to the area, while others say the signs of reckless behavior had been evident for years. "He always did things his own way," said James Wilson, a longtime Klondike miner. However, no one believed that meant breaking the law to this extent. The case represents a historic turning point for the reality TV industry, which has seen its share of scandals, from off-screen scandals to behind-the-scenes manipulation, but has never seen major characters in a popular series face criminal charges of this size. Many questions remain as Tony and Mike Beets begin their lives behind bars. Discovery Channel and Raw Television, the production company behind Gold Rush, have already announced significant changes to the show's production and broadcasting. Media analysts say networks will be forced to implement stricter oversight and vetting processes for reality shows going forward. The criminal trial of Tony and Mike Beets is over, but the legal drama is far from over. What will happen to the family's remaining mining claims and equipment? Will the rest of the Beets family go back to mining? Or has the Beets legacy ended? And perhaps most importantly, how did one of the most famous families in gold mining go from television stardom to criminal convictions? The Beets family's remaining assets are the subject of a separate civil proceeding, confirmed by prosecutors, that will address the financial and environmental effects of the family's decades-long mining operation. According to legal experts, a significant amount of the Beets family's assets, including mining equipment, real estate, and residual profits from their television appearances, will probably be seized and liquidated. Given the presence of toxic substances like mercury and cyanide found in the soil and water, cleanup efforts may take decades, and the proceeds are expected to help cover the estimated $20 million in environmental remediation costs for the Paradise Hill site and other affected areas. The criminal convictions represent a severe and unprecedented blow to one of the Discovery Channel's most successful and recognizable franchises. The Beets family played a key role in Gold Rush's appeal, which has been one of the network's highest-performing reality shows since 2010. Tony Beets' exaggerated persona, no-nonsense demeanor, and unconventional mining style were major draws for viewers. Following the scandal, Discovery announced that it would continue Gold Rush, focusing on the remaining mining crews, including Parker Schnabel and Rick Ness. Without them, Gold Rush will need to reinvent itself, or risk losing its core audience, one television analyst said, expressing doubts about the show's future survival. Without the Beets family, who contributed drama, tension, and a multi-generational narrative to the series. The Beets were controversial, but also a ratings goldmine. Future episodes will reportedly include behind-the-scenes disclosures and address the fallout from the Beets case, both on screen and off. As the civil trial draws near and environmental crews begin long-term cleanup at Paradise Hill, the future of the Beets legacy, and the franchise that helped make them famous, remains uncertain. Raw Television, the show's production company, has committed to increasing transparency and compliance going forward. Chris Dumit, the beloved carpenter-turned-gold room operator, who had worked with several mining teams over the years and gained widespread respect for his quiet dedication and craftsmanship, was one of the familiar faces from the Gold Rush that emerged with heavy hearts as the courtroom emptied and the weight of the verdict set in. Reporters gathered outside the courthouse, and Dumit spoke for many in the Gold Rush community when he said, "This is a sad day for everyone involved. Nobody wins here. The land has been damaged, lives have been destroyed, and a shadow has been cast over an industry filled with hard-working and honest people who do things the right way." Cameras clicked quickly, documenting what felt like the last chapter of a dynasty, as correctional officers approached Tony and Mike Beets to take them into custody. The final moments of the Beets trial unfolded inside the courtroom, with a surreal blend of drama and resignation. The elder Beets, the once large-than-life Viking of the Klondike, then broke his silence just before being let out. He said a short and solemn goodbye to the crowded courtroom, which was filled with reporters, former crew members, and devoted viewers. The Viking has fallen. He was then let out the doors that would separate him from the empire he had spent decades building, his dredges, his claim, and the legacy he once proudly displayed to millions of people. For Gold Rush fans, it was a watershed moment. Scenes of untamed tenacity and victory, campfire dinners, roaring machinery, and golden cleanouts have now assumed a more nuanced and unnerving tone, and episodes that once extolled success now seem tainted by deceit, environmental damage, and treachery. Environmental groups have begun using clips from the Gold Rush, along with evidence from the Beets trial, to teach people why strict mining laws are important. The conviction forces a reckoning not only for the Beets family, but also for a devoted audience, now left to wonder how much of what they saw on screen reflected reality, and how much was carefully concealed behind the camera. These materials are intended to illustrate the harm that can result from disregarding regulations. The case has also brought up difficult issues regarding reality TV, with some arguing that TV producers ought to be held more accountable for ensuring that the content they produce and make money from is done in a way that is both morally and legally acceptable. As a result, a number of TV executives are now advocating for new regulations throughout the industry. Tony's other children, Kelvin and Monica Beets, frequently appeared on Gold Rush working with the family, but they were not charged in the case because there was no evidence that they were involved in any illegal decisions. They want clear steps to ensure that companies shown on TV are following the law, especially in industries like mining. The consequences of the Beets conviction are still being felt as the Yukon mining season begins, without two of its most prominent figures. In a joint statement, they expressed shock at the severity of the violations and requested privacy as they consider their next steps in their personal and professional lives. In response, Discovery Channel has created stricter rules for any mining shown on its programs, including regular environmental checks, and local officials have announced that all mining operations in the area will be subject to more inspections going forward. A new documentary is also planned to examine how the illegal activities went unnoticed for so long, even while they were being filmed. Tony Beets, who once referred to himself as the King of the Klondike, is now facing life in prison, far from his claims of wealth and television attention, and the mining empire he spent years building is gone. Industry experts say this case has permanently changed reality TV and disproved the notion that fame could shield someone from consequences. The very justice he believed he could outrun washed him away.